Hey everyone, this is Jake. It's beginning of March now, so we're going to talk about what I've been developing in February for Scrabdackle. This is going to be a little bit more off the cuff. I tried a video devlog back for the November devlog, and I was hoping it would save me a little bit of time of writing up everything. I ended up just kind of writing a script for it and not really saving myself time, so we're just going to kind of jump in here. And I'm just going to talk through things kind of as they are happening. So I'm going to switch over to Godot. Mostly I've been working this week on a lot of tasks related to getting the next demo ready. So those are systems like having a main menu that is working correctly and all of your settings, important things like keybinds, which I'll show you here. So let me just actually boot up the game and I'll come back and show you what I've got going on here. Alright, so this is the new title screen that I think I've showed before. I'm not sure if I've showed before, if I showed last time. We've got some new buttons that don't have sound effects yet. The play, of course, goes to the save select that I've shown before, that I worked on last month, but we'll go back. We're going over to settings right now. So these ones are all set up. You will be able to separate, the in-game like creature grunting from the sound of clicking as you're going through a menu like this if you want to. I've got a little description that changes along the bottom here depending on the last setting that you've kind of toggled, and you can see which one you're hovering over and so on. I'll switch over. I've got some different button types for things like the animated cursor that we can see here, just turning it back to a regular mouse. Those buttons aren't all hooked up yet. I'm slowly starting to hook those in. And I've got some things I'm planning for when you've got a gamepad like an Xbox controller hooked up. We're going to jump into the keybinds though. So this is a new menu that I did at the start of this month. And basically keybinding, if you're not familiar, is just the ability to basically change your controls. So I had to get something that showed all of the controls in the game, which we've got here. We have the keys you use for navigating a menu. Like I can use W to go up and S to go down in this menu. It'll be bound to something different for a controller, of course. We have a couple of keys that will always work for just accepting a selection in a general menu, but when you're in game, we want to have controls in a different context. So this is like the player moves around the WASD keys, but as we'll see, I can also bind that to, let's say, IJKL, and I'll show you what was just up there in a moment. So here we can see we've got a bunch of keybinds that are changed but not locked in yet. So I'm actually going to hit apply and lock those in, and we'll go back and they're basically normal. They're a slightly lighter color. It's not too big of a deal. But let's say we want to change them back to ESDF. We actually can't do that. We don't have the ability to apply anymore because we have overlap within a context. It doesn't matter that there's overlap with the menu navigation, that's a totally different scenario, but for actually in the game, you can't have two things have the same context. So I'm going to hit reset all, and we're just going to jump back, and these ones are the original ones. They've still got that green check just because we haven't accepted that change yet. But why don't I show you that little animation that's been coming up? So this is a little timer basically. It's actually a lot longer than 5 seconds. And I'll show it again. Basically, we've got our little mini blue from the minimap in-game, kind of jumping from number to number. This was a lot faster to put together than you might think. I'm not spinning my wheels here with UI polish. But it's basically saying what the keybind is, and it's waiting for some kind of input. So that has to be a really distinct screen. Like you can see everything else darkens back here to make sure that you're only focusing on this section, because while this screen is active, any key that you hit or mouse click that you do isn't doing the normal thing that it should. It's basically only listening to get that key and say, okay, let's accept it. So if I try to hit space or something, it's not going to do the normal thing that space would do. It's going to try and assign that just for that specific context. So there needs to be kind of a timer for if someone's having problems. You don't want to get stuck in this screen or get yourself in a scenario where you can't hit controls or anything like that. So it has to time out eventually. I was checking out the, what was it, the Risk of Rain 2 key bindings, and they had something like that. That's it's a slower, or sorry, a faster timer, but I like the concept a lot. So just some visuals to kind of help you understand what you're doing as you navigate this menu, and the ability to kind of set it back to the way that I suggest you play. But you can, of course, rebind stuff from, if you don't want to use your mouse to click, you could change that to a key, although using the cursor still requires a mouse. There's also some special controls for navigating the lore notebook. This is basically, I think with this setup, you'll probably navigate it with your mouse, but I did need to create these controls for if anyone wants to either not use their mouse. There's a lot of different ways that you can navigate the notebooks. There's a surprising number of controls here, but for the most part, it's the same as the other controls I've used in the game, just with a slightly different context. But because in a controller setup, you've got a gamepad out with your Xbox thing, you can't necessarily easily click buttons. So I'm trying to make it feel more organic for that. I can't show you those key bindings, but it'll be things like using the left and right stick to make pages kind of scroll up or down. And the notebook will need to have a scroll function. Unfortunately, it's just the only way to make it work for localization with different lengths of text. So I'm going to apply all this. I'm going to go back, and I think it's time to jump into the game. Just because I forgot to show this before, I'm cutting this in here too. The main menu is basically just one screen where the menus exist off screen. I'm not moving a camera around, I'm just sliding objects to the side or moving the background around. The keybinds just live up here, and that's fine. It probably wouldn't work in a AAA gaming studio, but it works for me. It's fine. I want to show you something else I've been working on, which is the skill swap screen. So the way that you normally select your spells, and let me actually add a few. I'm going to use that developer console that I showed in a previous devlog. So I don't think this was working long term. It's just a little bit too awkward to come over here and click when you're kind of doing stuff over here in combat and you want to come over and switch. And also this tooltip that I really liked the look of was obscuring way too much. So I did like the idea of kind of this visual switch system that also showed you, these are attack spells, these are mobility spells. You can't have them equipped at the same time. You have to choose between one or the other. There's more options for special abilities. But it needs to be different for those reasons and for controllers. I don't really know how the controller would get over here and easily navigate, but even if I could make it work, it would probably be really awkward and messy. So instead, I'm going to hold the Shift key, and that's going to show us our skill swap menu. And the transition's beautiful, so I'm going to show you again. So right now, we have the Stratablast selected. The Lunarang test ability is not selected. Witchbrand is not selected. There's a bunch of abilities down here that are not unlocked yet. But I can switch over to Witchbrand and close it, and now I'm using that ability, which apparently the sound effect I've got set for this right now is still a thump. I've got to fix that. So you're kind of running around, I'm doing my own thing, I'm jumping from thing to thing, and I need to switch to my dash. Here we go. And I'm going to switch back to my pinwheel to get across this. Okay, I'm going to get up and close and personal with this boss and switch to Stratablast. I only finished this, it's a little bit buggy. Switch to Stratablast, and there we go. So it should be pretty quick of getting in and out of this menu. I think you can be in and out in half a second, like kind of as a minimum. So we get some information about what you're highlighting. We get the name of the spell, the description of the spell, those little icons that were over here before in the UI. I've kind of moved over to a nicer spot and added just the slightest variety of color to them. And this spinny pointer thing is really just cute. I just like it. It was originally going to be kind of your magic wand as you choose your spell, but this thing looks better. and it writes itself as everything shrinks in and out. There's some kind of polygons in the background that like imply the shape of a star. It's I'm really happy with this. I think it looks really good. There's some subtle stuff like the background fill of this pointer filling in and taking the appropriate color of a thing that it's selecting. Yeah, I only just got this working, so there's still a couple of bugs with it I need to sort out, but the general functionality is there, and it means I can kind of take this away. So why don't I jump over to Sprite, because I'm going to show you some menu redesign stuff that I'm still working on. Okay, so we're over here in Sprite, my drawing tool, and I can show you basically, let's make this a bit bigger. This is the way that I designed that skill swap menu. So I start with this rough concept of, you know, I want everything in this radial menu, and I'm going to work through, they should be in shapes, the background should darken, I'll center them, kind of give them some colors and icons. I'll change up how the icons look depending on what's selected or not, a little bit of kind of thickening for style in some places, giving this kind of darker fill with info in the center. But it's too big, so I shrink everything down and just fill in the space with little runes. And then I make the ability to have not yet found purple to kind of distinguish that there's nothing there to select. And then working on this kind of pointer mock-up for how that should look. But there's one other thing I'm doing over here that I've always known I'm gonna have to do one more time, is just rearrange this interface. And you know, I'm sketching up how I think it should look now. But basically, if I take out that section of all the spells, then there's a huge amount of space not used, and it's kind of an opportunity to reorganize now that I'm for sure certain of everything that's going in the game. So this is where I've landed right now. It's not done, it's still in progress. So there's going to be kind of your 3 spells. You don't select them from here, it's just going to show you the attack, mobility, and special that you currently have selected. Magic is still the same. Health is still the same, but I think I'm going to just show you from the beginning that there's other health that you can get so that the size of this overall thing kind of fills the correct amount of space. Speedrun timer's still here. And then all of those kind of little sub-screens and menus are going to be moved down here to basically, if you're familiar with like gamepad controllers, this is like the D-pad controls. So that when I was designing the gamepad controls, I kind of had to put the menu to stuff like this, and I might as well visually represent that. If you press right on the D-pad, it's going to open your notebook and so on. Not totally settled. You can see there's just a big chunk of currently unused space. I think I'm going to adjust. And I'm still kind of playing with some design elements, like do I make this a curved background, a flat background, no background. And then along the bottom, I've got some space for what I'm calling sigils. So there's going to be one icon. Obviously this is not the final art. For each scrying boon that you've got to kind of visually show, and then another icon for the current difficulty preset that you're using. Which I'll talk more about those later. I'm already all sorts of off topic. So there's a bit more redesigning to do there, but I like this top part. I mostly like this. The rest is kind of coming along, so there's still more to go there. We're going to jump into the game. So we're just going to select this blank save, start fresh. The next thing I want to show you isn't going to look different here. But I'm going to kind of show you what I'm talking about and then go behind the scenes. And don't mind that this is black now. That's fine. I just haven't changed something yet. So I'm going to walk over to the Fisher Net here, and you can see the conversation start up as usual. We noticed if you don't speak, they'll say something after a few seconds. We've got this icon to proceed. And I've got the ability to kind of navigate response choices. So that the implication is like, if you pick this choice, that blue has said, "Where is this?" in response to what the fishernet is saying versus "You saw me fall." I'll kind of click through a bit of this conversation. It's all available in the current demo. And we're going to kind of loop around, and we'll get back to this kind of same set of choices as before, but with a slightly different context of, you talk to this character a bit. So the way that I write dialogue historically has been kind of just with this really awkward Excel file. trying to figure out what choices lead to what dialogue things. And it's really a pain. We're going to jump back into Godot, and I'm going to show you the conversation graphing tool that I've been creating. Alright, so we're back in Godot. This is the room that we were just looking at with a lot of kind of messy test objects. Don't mind that it looks a little bit weird. What I want to show you is up here. It's the Conversation Grapher plugin that I created basically to let myself build conversations more easily, navigate them more easily, like kind of understand what leads to what, which was becoming a big problem, edit them easily, which was becoming a really big problem. Going back in and trying to adjust them is a lot harder than writing them initially. And it solves some other problems related to localization. So I'll get into that in a moment. I'm just going to kind of talk through what we've got going on here. So first of all, this is a plugin that lives in Godot. So I built it, but it's running live in kind of the normal way that Godot works, where we've got our scripts, we've got our kind of visual scene of what I'm looking at right now, this room, and then we've got this new tab that I added called Convo Grapher. And I'm going to use just the Godot built-in functions to make this larger right now so we can get a better view. So I can kind of scroll around in this empty space and say, okay, here's a piece of conversation I want to have. So a character might say, hey, what's up, buddy? Not very engaging, but you can either kind of not respond or say something back, not much, or choose between saying something else back, like don't talk to me. And then you'll get a different option that you can connect it to once you have other dialogue nodes. So let's actually clear this, and I did build some kind of tooltip modals for me here, just to make sure I didn't overwrite my own work. And I'm going to load a conversation. This is actually the FisherNet conversation that we just saw. Let me zoom out, and I can show you the full thing here. So it's actually larger than you might guess, but it's not that complex. It's mostly just the way that I like to write has some kind of organic sprawling. You can see things start to connect, split off, reconnect in other ways. There's a whole separate section down here. There's a whole bunch of these blue and green objects. So let me actually talk through what's going on. I will zoom back in. So basically every conversation has what's called an entry point. I can actually have multiple of these. So I could say, you know, there's an alternative start point that jumps you into a different part of the conversation. There is a check that I've called a sorter, which just basically checks any kind of field that I think is relevant, and I can just invent them on the spot. So if I check met, that means it's checking to see if I've kind of added this toggle that says we've met this character, which happens later over here in a different line of dialogue. So basically we're coming back to talk to this character. It's going to path us down to a different text object, and if it's the first time we've talked to this character, it's going to start somewhere else. So we kind of get this, ho there, that was some fall comment, and there's already this branch and reconnect that happens here. So there's a response where you kind of, you're not replying, but you proceed to the next dialogue. But if 4 seconds go by, it's going to proceed you to a different dialogue that's going to encourage you to press the kind of move on next key as like a soft tutorialization. And we'll reconnect over here. This is where we add a tiny little bit of code, which is going to track that we have met this character. This is more of like a pseudocode that I process. I don't need to do very many things in these types of code blocks. So it's quite simple, but it does fit my needs. And if I zoom back out, you can kind of ask more about the location, which is going to lead you up here. There's a couple other checks for other things, like I believe this is if you have or have not found your wand already, you're going to get a different option for a kind of a third path. You can talk a little bit about, you know, what this character is up to, what the location's like, where your wand might be, and all of these branches lead back to something that says jump point, go back to player update. And player update is actually this section down here. So we jump to a different entry point. And once again, we kind of flip through a check to see if you have your wand or not. But this is basically what I call a hub in these branching conversations. So the character has kind of talked to you for a little bit. It's been pretty natural. You have not hit every possible conversation topic that they have, but it has not just been a list of ask me about this and so on. And you get the options to kind of revisit earlier parts of the conversation that you want to hear again, or that you didn't catch before, like asking about what happened or the location. And these take you to different jump points with their own kind of jumps over here. So if I go to To Fall, there's another bit of the conversation up here. Where is it? Over here. So you ask about that, and it kind of organically fits back into this part of the conversation. And if it isn't an organic fit, if it's like kind of too weird of a segue, I can just add a unique kind of conversation piece. I can cut that off, move this down here, have the character say something else, and then connect this in just like that. These are all, movable as a group. It's pretty neat stuff. It's based on some built-in Godot controls that are very, very heavily customized for my own use and understanding. But this basically makes it really, really easy to like visually understand how does this conversation split, what matters, what are we talking about. I can jump through easily and see how things connect. And most importantly, when I save it, which I'm not going to do right now because I don't want to overwrite the change that we just did, but maybe I'll clear this, load up a different conversation. I don't know what bargain bin 2 is. Let's take a look. All right, we had a sample conversation I was working with here. If I make an adjustment here, I've got this organizer node that does nothing. It just kind of visually helps me separate these lines from each other by connecting it to an intermediary object. If I say I cut that and I connect that across over there, I've made a change. I can hit save and export. I'm going to overwrite the file that already exists. We're saving and we're good. Graph last saved a couple seconds ago. Let me open up the main view of the Godot editor again. And I'll go into my dialog folder and my, actually I'll show all these folders. So I save 3 things. This bit is a little bit technical. If you're not that interested in that, feel free to just jump to the next section, but I'll talk through it. So one is I'm actually just saving this entire scene that's in control of all of these points. So if I open up bargain bin 2, we can see that it's like this weird view of all of the blank nodes that were in there. And that's just like a convenient way for me to save what I'm working on. There's some data saved within these things that you can't quite see. But I think if I hover over one, it's going to show me stored values like that kind of recreate when I load it. And this will not be exported into any game build, so it doesn't affect the final file size. It's just kind of a convenience tool using the Godot interface for myself so that I don't have to like manually say when I'm loading the save back up how to restructure all of these things. I also save what's called conversations. These ones that say hard-coded are like older conversations, but I can open up the FisherNet one. 1 second, I'm going to bring that up in a different window. All right, I hope we're all excited about what we're seeing here. So one of the other types of files that is saved here is what's called a conversation resource file that I created. So it's basically just a list of all the relevant stuff going on. So I have kind of a group of every node that exists. I have a group of every memory thing. So we had that one called Met. They just kind of create themselves here. And each of these types of nodes, like a standard piece of dialogue, has a group for each one basically, which have kind of a soft name. So for the one that says how to get home 1, I can open it up and I can see that the body text is called FisherNet-how to get home 1-body. Come back to that in a second. That's for localization. but it also has a connection that the first choice response option goes to, which is dialogue/how to get home to. So I know that if you pick the second connection, it's going to take you to dialogue/how to get home to. And it's going to load up that text, which has a different body, which once again is one of these kind of weird bits, with its own connections of you can go back to 3, or you can go to jumps/player update. So I'll go to jumps player update, which says I go to entry point/player update, which says I go to sorters for the events that has wand. So I go to the sorter, and depending on whether this thing is true or not, we're either going to go to the first check-in hub of dialogue or the second. And that's all kind of representative of what we were looking at before. When I'm here actually in the scene, editing the scene, this is all I have to do to connect the conversation to the Fisher net. I'll kind of hide the old object. I'm going to add a custom node I made called dialogue player. And dialogue player has a space for conversation. I'm going to click Fisher net and drag it in and drop it here. And that's all it is to make the game actually read that conversation. There's some more scripting work I haven't done yet, but the kind of building blocks are all there. I just need to do a couple connections. So I can say when you naturally walk away, what entry point should I jump to? When I naturally kind of walk in, what entry point should I jump to? Past just kind of the ways that the conversation says to jump in. So by default, if I reload the FisherNet conversation, and I really enjoy using this, like this feels really fun. Down here in the player update section, there's an entry point called end. So whenever you walk away from someone in Scrabdackle, they just kind of make a remark, or they have the opportunity to make a remark as that happens. And basically this junk start, that's what the room is called, the starting area of junk heap, is going to know that the exit point, by default, because I haven't written anything, it's going to jump to that end exit point. Or I'm saying exit point, it's really an entry point that I'm using when you walk away. But I could also overwrite that to say player update, and walking away, you know, the character would say, so what's next for you? Which I don't know why they would say that, but just, you know, for the purpose of example. I also have some other controls here. I've gotten very confident with how to use these kind of editor tools in Godot. So something that was really a challenge before was with the old conversation shapes. Don't know how visible it is exactly. Let me try and zoom in. So every conversation has an exit point and an entry point. So if I'm the player and I'm walking over, I enter this pink area, nothing happens. I enter this turquoise area and the character starts talking to you. But if I exit the turquoise area, also nothing happens. The character only recognizes you leave when you exit the pink area, the second area. So basically that ensures if you kind of just barely touch the conversation entry point area, that you don't kind of immediately end the conversation by accident if you're doing like just a little circle through. There's a little bit of like breathing room built in. But it's very awkward to edit. If I show you on the side here, I basically have to kind of manually adjust all of these sub-objects, and then I have all these other things from the old way that these were displayed that I don't want to deal with these. I have them set up somewhere else. I don't want to like touch them every time I set up a simple dialogue, but they have to be visible because of the way that Godot handles making these like scene objects editable. That's the only way that I can get in and adjust these squares and stuff. Or it was, because in the new method, I can say entry shape is a rectangle. I'm going to make it about that big. I'm going to adjust it. I'm going to kind of move it around. Let's undo that angle. That was not necessary. So now when you enter the space, the character is going to start talking to you. And let's make a capsule. So when you exit, you know, this space, shrink it back down actually, character's going to stop talking to you. And it's offset a little bit so that it catches you when you're on the left side of this river, but it doesn't talk to you as quickly when you approach from the right side, and so on. This is like a bad example. I only just got this working, so it doesn't look very good. It's just kind of this basic white thing that kind of obscures too much, but this is going to save me a huge amount of headaches. It's really convenient for me to set up, and of course, if I want to use the default, which is just 2 circles like this for a signpost, I just leave it exactly as it. I don't have to customize it, but it means my scene tree on this right side of the screen is much simpler. Yeah, it's as simple as create a node, drag in my conversation, and we're pretty much good to go, other than any customization I might want to do from there. Okay, there's one last thing for this dialogue system that I want to show you, which is how it handles localization. I said there were 3 files that it saves. One of them is that conversation object I drop into the screen. One of them is that kind of visual scene file of how the graph is laid out. And the third one is a CSV file that handles basically the localization for me. So initially it's going to export everything into this series of 2 columns, one called key, one called en for English as a region. And when you saw before that all of the spoken text in the game would say fishernet-checkinhub1-c1, that actually is what Godot attempts to display initially, and it's built-in localization as long as I tell it that this is a translation file to use, which that tool automatically kind of hooks that all in. It's going to automatically replace that text with this in the game. So that seems like a lot of extra work for nothing, but the great thing is that when I've written all the dialogue and it's time to look at localization, I can just say, okay, well, first up, let's do simplified Chinese. I want the ZH region, and whatever that text is, I'm not going to attempt to, Google Translate it here or anything, but I could put it in over here. This would be example text in simplified Chinese. That would mean if the game was set to this region, that it would attempt to display this dialogue and choose this instead. So basically I can just hand off this document to like a localization group or whoever's kind of doing it, if I've got a publisher working on that, and they can just populate all the text against the appropriate keys without me having to manually build this document. It also groups things together, so right now this is just the fishernet conversation, but once I've kind of gone through all of the Act 1 dialogue, it'll all be here. And then there'll be a different tab for the Act 2 and so on. So I should be able to come to this document and basically get all of the information I need there. So that's basically everything I've been working on. It's very menu oriented. I'm just trying to get this game to a place where a new demo can come out with all of the really core fundamental systems in place. Really just in my spare time from that, I just add in a little bit of music when I'm kind of in the mood for that. I wrote 3 more tracks, and I finished a couple that had already been in progress. So I'll send you out with a little bit of music here, and hope to see you next time.